Our first speaker this afternoon is Chris Short with DevOps is Not War. Welcome to the stage.
Of course, my laptop fell asleep, and I said, oh, yeah, no problem, but joke's on me. I just upgraded to Catalina. All right, should be video. There we go. I did put a parental advisory notice up here for good reason. I think if anyone has seen me speak before, you know that I'm ex-military, therefore the occasional foul language does come out just naturally. Sorry, it's how I grew up. So I'm Chris Short. I work at Red Hat. I show this slide when I am traveling around the countryside giving talks to literally anybody, because I like to remind people that Detroit is not the apocalypse. These are all pictures that I've taken in Detroit in the past year. You know, the Google office really makes people say, oh, what, huh? So we should all be ambassadors for this city outside of it. So please, talk nicely about Detroit as you journey the globe. Anyway, so I work on the OpenShift team at Red Hat. I write a newsletter called DevOps'ish. I am also a Cloud Native Computing Foundation ambassador and a Kubernetes contributor. What does the CNCF ambassador thing mean? Well, it means I can take this massive landscape of cloud native tools and recommend the best one for you, supposedly. Good luck. I will pick the best one from the boxes that I think are the best, but yes, you have to do the rest. But why I'm actually here is because of this. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about my experiences and kind of what they have taught me about the world of DevOps. And I've done a similar talk like this before here, but the idea is that we can avoid a lot of conflict just by knowing our history. So, your chances of taking fire during day-to-day operations at your job is probably zero. It's about zero, right? So when I say taking fire, I mean you're getting shot at. So we are in Detroit, and I still say that. That's a joke, please laugh. I love this city, I really do. So I made up this statistic. Why? Because when I first got out of the military, someone had to remind me, Chris, we're just making websites here. No one dies if production goes down. Duly noted, thank you. That's still really hard to break though, right? Like thousands of times a day, we all make a decision. Sometimes that decision can have greater impact than others, but they all rely on this one button. How many times a day do you make a decision? How many times a day are they wrong? Often. What's the impact? Minimal. That's the point. We're making DevOps here, not creating conflict, right? Like we're building bridges. We're creating, bridges between chasms within the workplace, but also technologies, right? So, DevOps is not war. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about someone called Thucydides. We're going to talk about Graham Allison and Thucydides' trap, which is a term that Graham Allison coined. All right, who's Thucydides? He's a white piece of granite sitting in Greece. No, he was an actual person. He wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War. He's considered the Athenian, he was an Athenian historian in general, and he did not reference intervention of the gods in his work, so he's considered very much a modern historian and created kind of political history in a sense. He recounts the 5th century BC war between Sparta and Athens. This is interesting work that he's done for DevOps, and I'll explain why in a second. This is Graham Allison. He's an American political scientist. Professor at Harvard, he's done a lot of cool stuff, but I think one of the coolest things, he's been an advisor and a consultant to the Pentagon since the 60s. That's a long time. Cold War to now, I mean, that's pretty amazing. He's best known as a political scientist for his book, The Essence of Decision, explaining the Cuban Missile Crisis. This basically explained how the situation was diffused and how close it got to being bad, and has become like a great work within the Department of Defense. He was awarded a Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service a few years ago. So, he coined the term Thucydides trap, and I'm going to read the quote to you because it's vitally important. It refers to the natural, inevitable discombobulation that occurs when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power. Later in the definition, Graham states, this can happen in any sphere. Now, in Graham's sense, he's talking about spheres of geography or geopolitics or whatever, but it really can happen in any sphere. And let's dive into that a little bit further. So, over the past 500 years, Graham showed in 16 cases, a major rising power has threatened to displace a ruling power. Guess what? Only 4 of those ended in peace. It's a pretty high failure rate. Peace is the goal. DevOps is the goal. Collaboration is the goal. The 4 cases that avoided this outcome did so only because of painful adjustments by both sides. The challenger and the challenged alike had to make changes to avoid conflict. So if you're on a DevOps community of practice, team, engineering, squad, whatever you want to call it, if you're a DevOps engineer, don't act as if you're the new awesome and don't bend. You must be somewhat, what's the right word? Not ambiguous, that'd be gregarious maybe, in trying to make change. You have to understand that you have to be flexible just like the person you're working with has to be flexible. So let's bring the two together. Let's talk about Devon Ops, let's talk about fear, and let's use an example from history to kind of bridge the two together and see how we can make this work for us better. All right, so let's talk about Devon Ops for a moment. It's like making s'mores by a campfire. I was actually doing this last week in Yosemite National Park. It was pretty awesome. So let's, we talk about, we sit around a campfire making s'mores. Everybody's happy, singing songs. That's Devon Ops now, right? DevOps is 10 years old. There's no conflict in anybody's organization, right? Right? If you've gone through like a quote digital transformation or have tried to embrace DevOps, don't raise your hand if you had a conflict. If it went smoothly, raise your hand. Yeah, I see one hand in the back. Good job. I'm proud of you. I really am. But here's the thing, right? Like, Devon Ops, that divide is getting closer and closer and closer together, right? Like, I work on the Kubernetes project. I see that as like a clear, like, tool that draws lines between Devon Ops, but guess what? It's all the same tool set. So it's as close as you could possibly get without, being called a developer. So only outliers remain, AKA not Silicon Valley, right? Like who's running Kubernetes in production here? StockX people, I know. Some other people I know. Cool, right? Like it's getting closer than ever. So let me tell you a story. Last week, the Air Force finally retired its last 8-inch floppy disk. Who in here even knows what a floppy disk is? Thank you. Okay, so some of the audiences I talk to, like Silicon Valley, no hands go up. I don't feel as old here. Thank you. These things were in existence for so long because they worked. But now they don't. And why don't they? Because the technology has evolved to the point where we can't make things like this anymore. Or it doesn't make sense to make things like this anymore. It's actually more expensive to maintain this equipment than put in something newer. But we also want something that works. If you want to read the article, check out that shortened link. It's right there for you. That was last week. Now, a couple years ago, I was actually part of a team that bid on the contract that was part of that effort to annihilate that 8-inch floppy disk from all nuclear missile silos across the globe. So if you don't know what US Stratcom is, they control the entire US weapons nuclear arsenal. So they kind of have a lot of power. But when they say, we want to do Agile and DevOps, myself and John Willis are like, we want to help. So I was working with him at the time, and we bid on this contract to actually roll out OpenShift, DevOps, Agile, like they wanted Jenkins, they wanted all the bits and pieces, Jira, they wanted the entire, DevOps stack, for lack of a better term. And they wanted all the communities of practice and processes and all the culture along with it. They were bidding for that. They wanted bids for that. If you don't believe me, go to that link and you can read exactly what I just told you. Kind of scary, right? Hey, Agile, DevOps, nuclear weapons. It happens all the time though, right? Like we have seen repeatedly where things get used in ways we don't like. It happens. But this is how powerful DevOps is. It eliminated an 8-inch floppy disk that had been used forever. And no one had a problem with it until this came along. So clearly there's something here, right? So when people walk in and say that won't work here, I say the US nuclear weapons programs are embracing DevOps, folks. This is kind of hard for you to say that won't work here, right? Like they have one of the most critical things on earth to use and protect and manage. And you're telling me you can't do it? It's malarkey. But I'm going to hear it again. Why is that? Fear. It was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. Remember, Thucydides was an Athenian general and historian. He documented the war between Athens and Sparta, and it was straight up fear is what he ruled that made this war inevitable. One side feared the other. Devon Ops, making s'mores. There's an element of fear here. Remember that. But if you don't believe Thucydides, Jedi Master Yoda. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Think about that at your workplace. I've been in some really crappy workplaces where they were trying to do DevOps and they were doing it the wrong way. So they feared change, and that made them angry every time I made a request. Oh, you're doing it against our way. Well, sorry. And they started to hate me because it was starting to be effective. Well, that's no good. And then they started to make me suffer. And then I left. That's how this works. But the change already happened. They just pushed the person that made it happen out, and it was going to keep going regardless. Right? Like, the damage was already done. Their hate led to suffering. What are they going to do? They're going to repeat the cycle again and realize that it's over. So, it's the rise of something new, DevOps, and the fear it instills in people that makes conflict possible. Think about that. I walk into an IT admin's office today, I'm like, hey, you're part of a DevOps team now. Congratulations, go work with these developers. He's going to sit there and be like, what? What does that mean? They have no idea. So they fear it. People fear the unknown. People fear change. So, let's pull an example from history of successful hegemonic change. The United Kingdom versus the United States. Wait, what? Not the Revolutionary War, surprisingly. In early 20th century, we had a very peaceful transition of power. Global power. So there's a bunch of quotes I can read, but I think the one that mattered the most is First Lord of the Admiralty in 1901 said, I would never quarrel with the United States if I could possibly avoid it. Why'd he say that? Well, Teddy Roosevelt was massively expanding the US Navy. The Monroe Doctrine had basically pushed the British Empire out of the Western Hemisphere for the most part, aside from, a very, very rugged Canada. And there was a lot of kind of, bellicose remarks coming out of Teddy Roosevelt's mouth, as we could, possibly wonder. But it did lead to something pretty awesome. So this is the British Empire at the time. The sun never set on it. It was massive. It had all these problems, though, and instead of trying to stay as the global number one, they opted out because it required war with the United States, and they knew they had trouble on the home front in the early 1900s. So instead of going to war with the United States, they realized, hey, we're going to have a problem in our backyard here pretty soon. We should probably not do this and become buddy-buddy. So the UK decided not to oppose very provocative US behavior, naval interdictions, all kinds of bad stuff that the US was, oh, you know, it's international waters, it's fine kind of thing. But, you know, they conceded global domination because the US economy was outstripping the British economy just like 5x year after year after year. So they had no choice. With problems on the home front brewing and, you know, an economy that couldn't keep up and no presence on the Western Hemisphere other than a couple ports here and there, there's no way they could fight the United States in the early 1900s. So we actually became friends. We formed within 14 years, from 1901 to 1915, what was called the Special Relationship. It still is called the Special Relationship today. When World War I came, the U.S. was a key material supplier to the United Kingdom, and when the United States joined World War I, it became the tipping force that made the Allies victorious. Say what you will about after World War I, but that is a peaceful transition where both sides actually had to do quite a bit to make that transition happen. The UK had to concede world power, basically. The US had to befriend through strife, you know, a one-time adversary. So it creates a very, very special bond very quickly. All right, so DevOps isn't about automation or tearing down silos. It's about improving business outcomes and work environments and making our lives better, right? It's not a war crime, sorry. What about everybody else on board, though? Security, networking. DevOps isn't just for IT either. There's other departments that can help in your DevOps transformation, digital transformation, whatever you want to call it. And let's talk about change and failing fast. So DevOps the War Crime was the original title that Corey Quinn suggested I make this. If you don't know Corey Quinn, he writes Last Week in AWS. I'm sure you subscribe to his newsletter. He's pretty funny, but this is a little harsh. So, but he made a good point. He's like, think about it. DevOps threatens people's jobs, threatens their, you know, their homes, their livelihoods, their kids, their college, whatever. So what happens to my job as I'm going through this transition, as we change to this methodology of DevOps? I worked so hard to get here, and now I have to pivot, da-da-da-da-da. I actually had one coworker say, Chris, should I just retire now? No. You're a vital part of this change. You might feel like you could retire now, and I'm glad that you think that, but you're the head of the monitoring team. We just need to change which metrics you're looking at. We need to go from not just CPU, disk, and memory to actual API calls from AWS, because that costs us money. S3 bucket storage, anything goes over a certain amount, or, you know, things leaving certain regions, we want to know about it. That's the things you want to see. Those are the metrics you need to look at. Changes life. But all he just needed was to just refocus. So, what about networking? What happens when you need more hardware? It's not all just software out there, folks. There's a lot of ASICs out there that are moving a lot of network traffic right now that are connected to these things called RJ45s that run on this thing called 802. I forget which one, but it's called Ethernet and Cat5 cables. Network engineers are awesome because they know about these things called VLANs and subnets and NATs and VPNs. And wait a minute, that sounds like a VPC. That sounds like the thing a lot of people screw up, that and S3 buckets. So imagine if your network folks could automate and iterate as fast as you could as a developer or as an operations person using, you know, Ansible or Chef or Puppet. So bring your network folks on board. Show them the gains that you've made. See these challenges that you've, you know, advanced over. Show them that. Remember that a rising tide can lift all boats. But if you put up a wall, the water's not going to go over it until it's too late. And the wall will come crumbling down, and it'll just flush everybody out, and it'll just be nasty and bad, and we don't like that. Also, if you skill up those people, they can go on your on-call rotation. Or even better, they can get new skills, figure out where problems lie, and reduce the amount of pages you get overall. They can work together collaboratively in ways that maybe just a software engineer and a sysadmin couldn't. Trust me, bring them on board, you will learn many, many things. What about security? Archie, DevSecOps? I mean, it's a necessary term. It's necessary. Why? Because if you don't bring your security teams on board, you'll end up like Equifax. Equifax and all these people that are downloading these, thousands of copies of invalid or vulnerable version of struts, they either are aware of it and have isolated or are not aware of it and are vulnerable. Imagine if their security people just had their, one tool in the pipeline of your software delivery chain. Just that one scan of that server to make sure that, hey, before you expose it to the internet, make sure it's not all crusty and stuff open. Actually had a security person say, should I just retire now? He'd gotten so used to, Windows security and not having to worry about Linux and network and cloud and anything else that it just became so overwhelming. I was just like, no, it's like an elephant. Just one bite at a time. And then take it easy, iteratively work at it. But you can help those people skill up too. And now they're on the on-call rotation. They're finding things and helping the team eliminate issues as well. But you have to prove to security people definitively where they can add value and where you're adding value if they get involved with you. They're very busy. They are suffering from that alert fatigue already. They're swamped in tools. They need help automating all of it. So there's your big win. Go help them automate something. Bring them on board. When was the last time you reached across the aisle and helped somebody automate something? Think about that. One small bit of automation or one tool being taught to somebody in security could take them a long, long way and help you out a lot in the long run. So help security shift left with you. Pen testing in the pipeline would be awesome, I think. But DevOps isn't just for IT. Business processes matter, right? So being lowercase agile as an organization requires more than just development and operations, right? Like we understand that business strategy has to adapt along with the market as it adapts. And the market is changing faster and faster because of people that are using things like DevOps. Some business processes will need to be changed along the way. You should be looking for those things early, not figuring out where the business process fails after your automation's built. You should go out and figure out why something exists the way it does and say, if it's a business process that something like SOX compliance, make sure that you have that box checked before you just go out and iterate on a new tool and throw the old thing out. So bring legal in. You know what? C-suite can help you here too. They can take a lot of pressure off your back so you can build that foundational layer of automation that'll get you moving again faster. Marketing. I work in marketing. I'm a technical marketer, and that means different things to different people, but I work in marketing. If you really wanted me to, and you were working as, slogging away as a DevOps engineer in Red Hat, I could help you get a meetup going or some kind of internal DevOps days that would help you scale DevOps within your organization. So think about that. Reach out to a friend in marketing and say, hey, I want to do this lunch and learn. Can you help me out? Chances are they can buy you lunch. Free lunch, people come. Don't discredit the people not writing code is what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, if you're a developer in the room, I'm writing code. I work in marketing. It happens. People do stuff outside of what their job title says. I think that's why DevOps exists. Everyone can be helpful in tearing down walls is my point though, right? Everybody in the organization can help in this more collaborative experience. So I want to spend a little bit more time on change and failing fast here. Different isn't always bad, right? People fear change, and we have to realize that different isn't always bad. So I'm standing in front of a crowd 3 years ago, I was standing in the same place. I had never done it before. But because I knew different isn't always bad, I knew I could stand up here and talk to you and hopefully help you change something in your organization for the better. We inherently value success, right? So like I was super fearful I was going to fail, but I did it anyway, knowing that if I did fail, I could learn from it. Celebrate massive failures. Maybe not in the same way you celebrate massive successes, but that post-mortem should be the best learning experience ever. Like the Sonatype presentation from Equifax, that congressional report is amazing. Go read it if you haven't yet. That presentation was amazing too. But that post-mortem from Equifax and all the things that happened around it, around that Struts 2 vulnerability, showed how failure happens just naturally as enterprises grow, and maybe where you could build more resiliency in your organization. Throwing good money after bad is a problem. Don't do that. If you've gone through many failures, maybe change tact. We all agree cars are better than horses and buggies, but we all agree that cars had a lot of mistakes in them year after year after year, generation after generation after generation. You know, we didn't have seatbelts at first. Now we do. You know, cars that bend as opposed to never bending. That helps. Figuring out a dud early is better than dumping millions into a failure, right? Like, iterate quickly, but you have to be set up to iterate quickly. You have to mentally be there to iterate quickly. Safety 1 versus safety 2. We have to think a little bit differently about safety. You know, failing fast means going fast. Well, how do I go fast safely? Bring in your security people. Bring in your compliance people. Bring in legal. You're going to have to at some point. And don't forget about the andon cord, right? If something's bad, an automated system should be pushing that andon cord for you in DevOps. You shouldn't be seeing it. It should already be called out for you. All right, so we know people can feel threatened by DevOps. Let's address that early. Finding allies and creating successes together is key. Think of the US and the UK and its lead up to World War I. Early inclusions and concessions are key to success. And fail quickly and always be a learning organization. So, I always like to leave with a quote, modified it for better accuracy for my use case. I must study politics and war that my children may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. I've studied a lot of politics, I've studied a lot of war. My daughter is now studying history at the University of Cincinnati. Don't know what she's going to do with it, but she ain't fighting in the military anymore. So I think we've advanced very well. And that's because we've worked together more than we've worked against each other. With that, thank you. These slides are available here at this link.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody have any questions for Chris?
Questions?
He will be here.
I will be here all day today, all day tomorrow. If you have Kubernetes questions, want to figure out how to get started contributing to Kubernetes, I'll be around. I'll probably be sitting up front here, and I'll be in open spaces. Just come grab me. We can talk.
Sweet. Thanks, Chris.